Can your PC run Call of Duty Black Ops 7? Well, the PC recommended and minimum system requirements have been posted online, and there's pretty good news regarding the requirements and also what the developers are actually including for the PC version of the game. With that said, there are a few caveats that we do want to talk about here. So first of all, this is being engineered for the PC, so they do mention specifically that there are 800 plus options to customize the graphics, gameplay, input devices, and so on. And obviously we're going to see support for standard ultra-wide displays. AMD FSR is also included, DLSS, and furthermore, there will be a built-in benchmark tool, which is absolutely phenomenal. And of course, we will be doing testing on the channel for this game, but what I would also recommend is you, of course, do download the game and then figure out what roughly settings you think would be appropriate for your rig, maybe follow the guides from this channel or other content creators, and then naturally run a benchmark or two just to get a good understanding of how the title will run on your system. With that said, there is, however, a really big requirement that I know is worrying a lot of people, and that is the Ricochet anti-cheat, because it requires TPM 2 and secure boot. Now, what I would recommend you guys do if you're not sure whether your system can actually run this is if you hold the Windows key on your keyboard and press R, you can type in TPM .msc, and then if you hit the enter key, you can see here on screen TPM, and this is under the status, TPM is ready for use. Now, basically speaking, if you don't see that, there could be something that you need to resolve. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to create like a guide on how to do this more extensively, but I would recommend that you go into the BIOS of your motherboard. Usually there's an option there. Very old processors or much older CPUs may not support this, but if you have a Ryzen CPU or a more modern Intel processor, this system here I'm using is a 10900K to give you an idea, but also, other CPUs in Intel's, those type of generations of processor, and certainly more modern ones like the 12th generation, 13th, 14th generation, they all do support it, but you may need to enable it in software like the BIOS. With that said, let's now take a look at the actual PC requirements. Oh, and by the way, the game will be available for preloading on the 10th of this month, November, and of course it will launch on the 13th. First of all, there's some bad news. Hopefully I can actually bring this up in a new tab. There we go! I have some genius ability. So first of all, you can see that the major problem here is the PC handheld specifications are kind of anemic. There's not a huge amount of information on how it will run on, let's say, a Steam Deck or other devices, so hopefully we get more information about that. I personally don't have one of these devices to test, so we'll just have to wait and see what other content creators will provide us in terms of information. Now, what you would also want to, of course, for minimum requirements here, and they do mention that the minimum is also in text form here, so I'm just going to read it from this just to make it easier for everyone. I'm also going to do like a little bit of a scroll, and this way it kind of just focuses our view, and I'm just going to reject all the cookies. We don't want cookies. They're tasty, but they don't help us here. So Windows 10 at 64-bit, not surprising. A Ryzen 5 1400 or an i5 6600. Again, this is what I'm saying, like TPM is supported by tons of generations of processors, so there's a very good chance that your system, if it's moderately capable of running games right now, like Black Ops 6, for example, you probably do support TPM. RAM 8GB, so that's actually really quite, feasible. An RX 4070 or an GTX 970. So, unsurprisingly, because they do want to appeal to as many gamers as possible, this does not require like DirectX 12 Ultimate stuff like mesh shaders, ray tracing. 116GB of SSD space, so that's going to be interesting. And as for the video memory, a 3GB frame buffer. I would actually be really interested, although the GPU isn't technically supported anymore, I wonder if something like a 780 Ti would run. But to run 60 FPS, you would want to run all of the settings to high. I'm assuming this is going to be a 1080p display, although it's not specified. Recommended, though, is a 6700K or a 1600X from Intel. 12GB of memory, which is an arbitrary amount, but there we go. I'm not quite sure how that would work with a dual-channel memory set, but there we have it. An RX 6600 XT or a 3060. So that right there is really, of course, important because there are a ton of people running RTX 3060s or Intel Arc B580, 8GB of memory. I think most people now would have 8GB of memory on most of their GPUs. There are some people running 6, of course, but this is going to also, of course, be paired with that 116GB of available space. Now, if you are a baller, if you're someone with a lot more power, I wouldn't say an unreasonable amount of power, but certainly you're up there. A 10700K or a 5600X from Intel or AMD respectively, and 16GB of memory. To be honest, guys, memory prices are really up and down at the moment. In fact, actually through the stratosphere. But even if you have a system like this, like a 6700K, I mean, I don't know why you would have 12GB of memory, but I would highly recommend 16GB. You can actually get some pretty good deals on like DDR3 memory or DDR4 memory, depending obviously on the generation you're talking about. So you might be able to get one of those and just kind of like wing it. Someone was asking me in my previous video talking about Resident Evil Requiem. They had 8GB of memory, and this is for a laptop, albeit, and many laptops can be upgraded as well. So that's a really easy one, that and an SSD upgrade. A 9070 XT or an RTX 4080/5070. I find that interesting actually, because the 5070, that does not have 16GB of memory. So yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. That's interesting, because an RTX 5070, there we go. Yeah, that's got 12GB. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But regardless, I do recommend 16GB. I'm assuming that you probably could get away with 12, but an RTX 4080 or a 5070. So I find that quite interesting, because this card and this card both have 16, but that only has 12. Recommended, obviously, they do want the latest drivers. Now, for just a bit of fun, I also figured it would be interesting to us to go back and check out the previous Call of Duty Black Ops 6, because this will give you some indication of how your system will run. Now, notice the competitive 4K. We're looking at a 3080 or a 4070 with 10GB of memory and an 8700K. Let's just make this easy. We'll just focus on Intel and NVIDIA for the specs, just because otherwise we're going to be going backwards and forwards all of the time. So again, 8700K and a 3080. So again, if we compare this, the requirements have gone up a little bit to a 4080, and an 8700K is now a 10700K, but I wouldn't say they've gone up significantly. The minimum specs, though, a 1400 Ryzen, 8GB of memory, so 8GB remains the same. An RX 470, and if you recall, where are you, my friend? RX 470, yep, and a Ryzen 5 1400, and where are you? No, that's Battlefield, sorry, wrong thing. I clicked on the wrong thing. Ryzen 5 1400. So basically speaking, if your system is just about capable or can hit the minimums or the recommended specifications on Call of Duty 6, is probably a good way of just tweaking and, you know, making it just about runnable. Is that a word? On the next COD. But so just briefly, I figured I would also talk about the recommended system requirements of Battlefield 6, just to give you guys a comparison. 16GB of memory and 16GB of memory for the recommended and minimum. So Battlefield definitely does have higher VRAM, memory requirements. The GPU is also a lot heavier, and the CPU particularly for both Intel and AMD is a lot heavier as well. So basically speaking, if your system hits the requirements to run Battlefield 6 reasonably, you can probably bet that Call of Duty Black Ops 7 is going to be absolutely fine as well. With that said, guys, hopefully you have enjoyed this video. It's been a quick one. We'll be doing a little bit of coverage when, of course, the game does come out. It's going to be out in around a week, of course. I'm not a massive COD guy, but even so, I think it will be interesting to do some benchmarks. With that said, take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.